Namaskar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, talofalava, kia ora. Whatever part of the world you are in, we welcome you to Weekender on Sunday. My name is Sunil Kaushal. Today is Sunday, the 13th of March at 5 p.m. here in New Zealand, and I welcome you all to this episode of Weekender on Sunday. It's great to have you, and thank you for allowing us to come to on your device or on your computer, wherever you are, or on YouTube and Twitter. It's been one hell of a week for New Zealand politics. What we have seen is the latest polls that came out, and for the first time, we have seen that National has taken over from Labour in the polls. However, it's still 18 months away, but for the National Party voters, it is a welcome news. However, for the government, there is a lot of work to do and maybe a realization where they've gone wrong and how they come back in the pool of play. But mind you, I've said it's about 18 months away, so a lot can happen between that. In other news, we have the ICC women playing the World Cup cricket here in our backyard in New Zealand, and some great games. And you have to admire the tenacity of the women cricket players. It's so different now. And, to me, when I look at that, they are at par, or some are even better than men's cricket playing players. So good on them. And I hope, that one day we'll also have IPL for women. And obviously the Kiwi, the White Ferns have been doing great, and so has the Indian cricket team. But really looking at the West Indian women, they have been doing really well. So it'll be interesting to see who goes through the semi-final and finals. In other world news, as everyone has been following, is between Ukraine and Russia. And, the Russian forces are outside Kyiv, ready to storm in, and we just hope that there is a diplomacy, there is some sort of a resolution before the loss of many, many, many lives and so much damage to the economy and infrastructure. Coming back to our guest today, we know that the local body elections in New Zealand are in October the 8th. And recently this week, the local government minister, Minister Mahutar, mentioned about Tauranga not being able to have the elections and the commissioner being there till 2024. However, the national hotspot is Auckland, and we have finally an endorsed Labour candidate for the Auckland mayoralty, and he is a current sitting councillor. I am privileged to have Efeso Collins, who is the Auckland Manukau Ward councillor, joining us today and talking about his vision, who he is, why we should vote for him in Auckland. And to tell us more, we welcome Efeso on Indian Weekender on Sunday. Thank you very much, Efeso, for joining us, and thank you for your time today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, talofa lava, Sunil, and thank you very much for having me today.
Sure. Efeso, most people will say, Efeso, who? So who are you?
Yeah, and that's expected, granted that the media doesn't give a lot of attention to local government politics. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for me to get out and to meet people in the community. I think where I work and where I'm based here in Manukau in South Auckland, I have a whole lot more connections. And so I see this campaign as an opportunity to get out and to meet people. I've been shouting the odd iced tea or latte, depending on what people are after, just to sit down with people and hear what their aspirations for Auckland are. And I've really enjoyed listening to people. I think it's a time in our history where many Aucklanders, we've come out of 2 or 3 lockdowns. It's been pretty tough on Aucklanders. We're in the red light settings at the moment. And I think there's a desire for Aucklanders to really reconnect at some stage. And as those settings start to change and we're allowed a bit more movement and a bit more freedom to move about, I think Aucklanders really want the opportunity to connect. So I'm doing my best as safely as possible to meet with people at local cafes or just in areas throughout the city so that I can hear what their aspirations are. And I'm really enjoying the opportunity to meet people in that way, Sunil.
Efeso, you were the first Polynesian president of the Auckland Students' Union at university. What has driven you into being a councillor and now running for mayoralty?
Yeah, look, it's going back about 23 years, and I enjoyed my time in the student union, and it's probably a very similar journey that I'm on at the moment. Back in the student union days, I was heavily involved with ensuring that students from diverse backgrounds felt like that the student union and the student activities and facilities were there for them and they could access them. I think very similarly today, that's what my desire is for Auckland, is that everyone feels like we're a part of this city. We've made contributions to the city to build it up. And I really want people to feel that that's the Auckland that is for them. And so I'm really interested in how we build a united city. We've got over 200 ethnicities or languages that are spoken in Auckland. And I'm really fortunate that I was raised to speak Samoan as well. English is my second language. And so I think it's important that as we meet with one another, we understand the differences in the way we understand the world, see the world, because that's what Auckland is. It's such a diverse city. So that's what I'm all about. I'm a strong advocate. Both my parents worked factory floors. My dad was a taxi driver for all of his working life, and mum was a cleaner at Middlemore for about 30 years. And so I see the hard work that my parents' generation put in, so that for the Samoans at least, the dream was one of their kids would go to university. I'm the youngest of six, Sunil. I was the first to go to university in my family and the first to graduate as well. And since then, a lot of my older brothers and sisters have also gone through university. So I think what that speaks to is the opportunities that we have in Auckland, and how when we share the opportunities, when we take hold of the opportunities that are given to us, we're able to really succeed. And that's my desire for my young daughters as well, that they are given the opportunity so that they can flourish.
So, Efeso, you are saying you're a son of a migrant?
Yes, I certainly am. My parents came here from Samoa in the 1960s, and they met here. So they were, I think, in late teens, early 20s at the time, and they met here in Auckland, got married, and they had their family here in Auckland.
So obviously, as I hear you saying that they have seen, and you yourself have seen one of the six, some difficult times in the parent's life. How are you going to bring those experience into your military race? And assuming you took over the office, how would you be advocating for the so many migrant communities in New Zealand, not just Maori and Pacific Islanders, but the other 23%?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sunil. And it's one of the things that I've been doing is, so firstly, let's get out and meet people. Let's understand the stories that they bring. But it's also understanding that there are immediate needs that we need to meet on behalf of migrants. What kinds of facilities does council have to ensure that it reaches the diverse communities? And one of the things we know at council is that we've had to adjust the way in which we engage with the community, because we know that when you've got a diverse group of people, we don't all speak the same way. We don't all interact in the same way. And so it's important that people know that we're doing things differently in order to get their feedback, in order to get their sense of the vision they have for Auckland. And so one of the things that I've been really keen on, which isn't necessarily related to council, but I've been really keen on how we ensure that migrant workers who are based in New Zealand, for me, it's a lot closer because of the Pacific people who come in from Tonga and Samoa to do the seasonal work. But we know that there are a lot of migrants who come here to work. We know that there have been issues at a national level around families of those working migrants being able to get into the country. And that level of separation is difficult for our families. So I've been working in the background to make sure that the government at least has seen the need to make sure that our families are there, because they mean the world to us. We are doing this. So, very similar to the Samoan story, is we came here to work so that we could remit or send remittances back home to the islands. And that's often the case for our migrants. So let's make sure that we understand what the challenges are for the migrants. Let's understand that they need their families beside them as well. And so we need the right kind of immigration settings that's going to support many of our migrants. And then there's issues around employment law too, and how we ensure that they have the right employment representation and advocacy, so that they don't feel like they're being squashed into parts where they don't have a voice. So I know that's not a local government issue, but it's definitely an issue that's on my radar, because that's how we make people feel a part of Auckland, is that they can work here, work, play, school, live here, and feel like they belong to Auckland too.
Sure. Thanks very much for that elaborate answer, Efeso. And I think some of the, there are some many home truths in your answer. Yeah, coming to a question as I'm, running for the mayoralty of Auckland, which is the largest city in New Zealand and an ever-growing one. There are so many issues. Firstly, people would say, what is your experience in running an organization or something like Auckland Council, which is a big, big organization? What skills do you bring and why should I vote for you?
Yeah, look, I've been in local government now for just on 8 years. So this is the 9th year I've been involved in local government. I was first elected back in 2013 to the Otara Papatoetoe local board. And so I've seen the way in which we've developed as a city. We've been a unitary council since 2010. And by the time this election rolls around, it would have been 12 years as a unitary council with 7 or 8 different local government councils coming together. So I think firstly, what we've got to do is ask ourselves, are we in the right position given we've now had 12 years of being a unitary council? We've been looking at how we had different regulations, different ways of spending, different ideas, all in the 7 different councils. Have we got the right standard at the moment? And I think an audit is probably a good thing that we should do. Let's review just exactly how well we feel that we've done and how well the public feel we've done as a unitary council. I think there are major challenges around our finances, and people will know across the city that we've taken some major hits because we've got investments in stadiums and airport shares where we haven't been able to enjoy the dividends that come from having those shares. So we've been really reliant on ratepayers and how much money they're giving to. So big conversation to be had there. But I think when it comes to leadership, my style is one that listens. I believe in a collaborative approach to leadership where we get people to sit down and really thresh out the ideas. And it's important that we have robust debate about what the best ideas are for Auckland. And I think one of the things people need to understand who might be watching at the moment is that the mayor comes with 1 vote, and then there are 20 other councillors around the table. So there are 21 votes in all. And it's important we have a mayor that's able to collaborate, understand what people's desires are for their local communities, so that you can form some sense of consensus, so that you can build an agenda that's progressive for Auckland. So my approach to leadership is one where I'm trying to bring people together, get some common themes, agree on some basic matters, and that's how we propel the city forward. So, other people might look in and think, well, the mayor has a lot of power. The mayor has a lot of influence in the sense that they've got the ability to work with councillors, but it's important people understand that the mayor's vote is just 1 vote of 21. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think my leadership style is one that's going to allow people to come forward.
Efeso, you mentioned about assets like the stadiums and other things. So are you thinking of maybe selling them off to recoup some costs?
Yeah, that's been a discussion. One of the things with our strategic assets is we have to go through a public engagement process before that could happen. I'm not putting that up as part of this election. I have no intention of selling any strategic assets for Auckland because I think they return a good dividend for us. And again, the challenge around having been shut down because of COVID is that a lot of where our shares sit at the moment means that we haven't enjoyed that dividend. And we've been I think council has a really prudent financial approach at the moment. We've been able to have major savings in this annual budget. At the moment, we're looking at baking in another $15 million of savings. So I think people will see that we've been a really prudent council. At some stage, people might want that discussion to be opened up, and that's one that we're going to have to go through a public consultation process over. But I have no intention of selling any strategic assets off at this stage.
Sure. Now, coming back to the recent, I think it was last week, everyone was very quick to go on to find the rates for my property. Yeah. And, we know there has been quite a big rise, some areas 36%, others less, and what in your opinion is around the rates increase? Is it justified, especially for low socioeconomic areas? Because
Yeah, I've
remember,
always,
yes, we do have renters, because then that will, the property investors will increase the rent. So, you take from one hand and give it from the other. So, as a mayor, what's your challenge and what's your solution to that?
Yeah, those are really challenging issues that we've got in front of us. And one of the things that I've been always a little bit alarmed by is the level of rates people are paying. I think in context, people should be proud of Auckland in that for our council, less than, I think around 45, 46% of our income comes from rates. So that's less than half of our major revenue streams is coming from rates. So Aucklanders can be assured that we are looking for alternative streams of revenue. One of the challenges we have in New Zealand and across OECD countries at the moment is the skyrocketing prices of houses. And so when our rates are connected to the capital value of our homes, that's always going to be a challenge. And I think that's part of our issue too. We've got a desperate need to increase the supply of housing in Auckland in particular, because that's seeing a percentage increase in rates. So that's going to impact on people in particular. The other thing that we've got to look at is how do we diversify our revenue so that we can still get a bit more money in from other forms of revenue. So that's where we're going to have to look. And you've already asked me the question about the sale of strategic assets. That's not something I'll be looking at. But what we can do is look at how we can diversify. And again, our finance teams are looking at that at the moment. Some people are saying there's layers of council where we should look at what those pay rates are. And I think that's a really good discussion to have. And we should be looking at our pay scales, because it's important that Aucklanders know that the services that we're providing meet what their expectations are of their rates. I think one final point I'd like to make, Sunil, is that I don't know that we've told the story all that well at Auckland Council, in that these are the things that your rates go to. And as we understand those services, those key services that are good for the public, like libraries, MOTAT, the zoo, community facilities and halls, swimming pools, that's what our rates are going to. So when we get the whole picture, I think Aucklanders can make some really key decisions. But I understand these are tough times. We have an inflation issue that's completely out of control. Cost of living in New Zealand is really hard going at the moment. So we're going to have to look carefully at how we're spending people's money.
See, the last 2 points, cost of living, inflation, everything, right?
Mm.
People would say, you're a Labour candidate. So what are you and the Labour Party doing to control it? And how will that affect me as a ratepayer in Auckland? And why should I vote for you?
Yeah. So Labour endorsed. So what that means is, I'm not trying to get away with anything here, but Labour endorsed means that the Labour Party are happy to support me as someone who is still an independent candidate, but will work well with, or work hard alongside Labor to be as constructive as possible. I think we've seen, look, that what the state handles is what the Crown handles, and we know that there is definitely a cost of living crisis at the moment. So that means that we need to review our level of rates, review our level of income that's coming in from other streams. But we've got some major challenges. We've had years of underinvestment in Auckland, and if people want to make sure, a lot of things we don't think about that we take for granted, those are the things we need to seriously give thought to, so that when you flush the toilet, you know that that water is going, it's being treated before it heads out to sea. That costs us money. We've got the central interceptor going in at the moment, so that's going to ease some of the pressure we have, especially when it rains. That's costing us over $1 billion. So there's major infrastructure costs that we've got to meet as a city, and that's what I mean by we've got to take a whole of look approach as to understanding the context we're in. My commitment to Aucklanders is that I will challenge the government on the issues where I believe they need to be challenged on. And one issue that's come up a lot this week is the regional fuel tax. I voted against the regional fuel tax, and that was because I think it's a regressive tax that has a major impact on poorer communities. And there's some discussion around what a congestion tax might look like, because that's much more targeted, and where we might get to the point where we would lean more on a congestion tax over the regional fuel tax, and how that change could happen. But we've got to get through some of this. There are projects that are in mind at the moment with the regional fuel tax. So if we are just to scrap it, we need to ask ourselves, well, where do we find the money to continue to invest in capital? So that's the big challenge the city has in front of it.
Efeso, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that you would make public transport free. And, to some of the people, it's a music to the ears. So how would you fund that? and where would you get the money from to offset it?
Yes, so there's a range of estimates, and I'm working with international experts at the moment. We'll produce a final paper in a couple of months just to give the finer detail. But there are estimates, depending on who you're speaking to, of fares-free public transport costing between either $100 and $215 million. I've had a look at the council budgets, and there are a number of budgets that we can pull from. So essentially what this is it's taking money from particular areas and redirecting it. Some of those places might be our consultancy costs. We spend over $50 million a year just on HR and legal consulting when we've got an HR and legal team in-house. So when you're spending $3 or $4 million a month on these services, it strikes me as a little bit irreconcilable that we're not using that money better elsewhere and just using the teams that we have. There are other transport budgets in excess of $200 million that we could look at. That looks at roading improvements and a number of other budgets where if we took a bit from each of those budgets, we could come up with $200 million quite easily, in my view. But the other thing that's important here is that we should look at the way in which we work with the Crown. And of all the public taxes that are taken in New Zealand, 93% of that goes to Wellington and 7% goes to local government. And if we're just getting that amount of revenue, then it's important that we have a strong discussion as to how we advocate for more of that money to come back to Auckland Council. That could be GST, which is close to $300 million. So there's a range of places that there's money that we could, if we fought hard for, come to an agreement with the Crown that money should be returned to Auckland.
Efeso, you've explained it well, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that you've been a councillor or you've been in local body politics 9 years. Why are you only waiting till the election year for these things? Why haven't you advocated it before?
Yeah, no, we have pushed fares free for a long time. Action Station are doing it at the moment. What we've taken is a staged process. So the government has announced that in July, people on low incomes will get half of their bus fare paid for through because they're on low incomes. And I'm advised that affects around 250,000 people. So that's been the staged process. I believe my intention is to set our ambitions high. And we know that we want to really fight the climate change and the climate action that is necessary. And nearly half of Auckland's climate emissions come from us travelling on our roads and in cars. So if we can get people out of the cars onto the bus or to the train, then we're able to seriously reduce our carbon emissions because people are using public transport more often. So I think if we look at a range of outcomes that are happening, not just the fact that people are able to overcome the price impediment of public transport, but they're also able to reduce their personal carbon emissions, then everyone's winning. And I think the long-term impact of that means that we're better off for the climate and that people are better off in their pocket.
I think, I think it is a given that many people will like free transport, but then the downside of it is that we don't have enough public transport.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're taking I don't have the figures, but if you're taking 5 cars off the road, is it equivalent to 1 bus emitting carbon emissions? Because then you would need frequency of the buses too. So how would you combat that?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So one of the things that Auckland Transport looking at the moment is just how far-reaching is our public transport network, and it's my understanding that it's not as good as it could be. So if we had fares-free and frequent public transport, what we do know is that there'll be an increase in patronage. That's a good problem to have, and I think that's something we should be celebrating. Alongside that, we've got to make sure that people aren't living so far. So a lot of the estimates today, a lot of the people, the experts in this area say if you don't have to walk more than 800 meters, which is about a 10-minute walk to a rapid transit line where the bus is every 10 or 15 minutes, then it makes it easier for people to catch the bus or the train. So we've got to look at that network. We know that there will be added costs to that, and let's see what those added costs are once we get to fares free and frequent. So I think this is a good problem to have. We know that the government is looking at the line between the airport and into Britomart. I know that tunnelling probably probably isn't the best way to go, but that's something that the government is driving. And what I think we need is that frequency, the ability for us to rely on public transport. You know that when you go to the bus stop, the bus is going to come, it'll come on time, and it will get you to where you need to be. So issues to be looked into, but I don't think it's beyond our control.
Efeso, you just said that the government is looking for tunneling, which is not the best thing. But then if you are the mayor of Auckland, that's under your feet.
Yeah, and
What's
that's
the solution? I mean,
yeah. Well, it's the challenge that we often have in local government is that the Crown can often come to the table with a whole lot more resource than we can come to the table with. And so it's important that we have strong advocacy. If Auckland has a leader that is putting its case strongly before the Crown and saying, this is what the people are saying, at least our ideas are being considered. And I know that when the review group was set up, they looked quite specifically at whether it would be above grade, which would be along the road, or whether there'd be tunnelling. And they debated those issues for some time. This is the outcome that they've come out with. The Crown is able to fund this. And I think we're at that point now where we've got to back ourselves and go with this option. They're still taking feedback. Yes, some people are saying that this is a more expensive option. But again, all we can do is really advocate for a strong position. And that position was strongly advocated for, but it's important that people understand that in the way this works is that local government plays an advocacy role here, whilst also agreeing that we will support what's best for Aucklanders. So that's just some of the weighing up challenges that we have in local government.
sure, Efeso, many people that I've talked to on the grassroots, on the streets, the shopkeepers, everyone, they've said that they are sick and tired of Auckland transport, sick and tired of Pinnacle developments, and it seems the mayor doesn't have any control over it. If you win the elections, how would you, because they are COO, they come under you as a mayor, but they are a rule to themselves, how would you combat that?
Yeah, I think we need to
Because
strengthen
these
our.
are your voters, these are your
Yeah,
people who
yeah,
would vote for you or who would not. So
yeah.
and if you are the mayor, you've got to look after everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think one of the things we need to do is strengthen our set of expectations. What people need to understand is that CCOs have their own boards as well. They have a connection to us, and the way in which they're connected to the council is by a statement of intent where we express to them our expectations. And what I think we need is a stronger connection so that they are clearer on what we expect of them. That's the only legal link that we have. And often people say, well, this is yours, you're running it. Technically, they have a board and they are answerable to their board. And when they were separated out, one of the things that I think we should have given some thought to when the law was written for the new super city was just how much control councillors will have. Because I think that's why we're elected. We're elected to make sure that people feel like their voices are being heard. And some of the things we hear all the time is locals are saying, well, Auckland Transport's not doing what we want. We want more of these things. And so we've got to understand the legal challenges we have, the regulatory functions we have, but I'm committed to ensuring that Aucklanders have a much stronger say, because what the CCO review found was that Aucklanders wanted CCOs to be more responsive to the needs of the community, and that's exactly what we'll be fighting for.
So what has been done after that review?
Yeah, so the review's was only completed at the end, around middle of last year. So we're managing a number of recommendations, and we're seeing relationships change. We're seeing reporting mechanisms that are stronger in place, and making sure that the boards connect stronger with Auckland Council. So what an example and point would be the Ports of Auckland board. When we would meet with that Ports of Auckland board, people felt like there wasn't a lot happening, and that's been strengthened. And you want people to be robust. You want, at a board meeting, you want people to just be able to get out exactly what's on their minds for what's the best for Auckland. And if people are being too polite, then you're not going to get anywhere. As long as you're respectful but robust, that's where the conversations can happen. And that's how we're set up at the moment. And if people feel strongly about this, there are some people I'm meeting who are saying they want Auckland Transport brought back in-house, that Auckland Council runs Auckland Transport, not a separate CCO. So that would require require a legislative change. And so if that's what people want, now I'm more than happy to give that a go, but understanding that that would require a legislative change for that to happen. So there's a bit of work to go on underneath, but I think it's really good that people are voicing their concerns, and we can look at stronger ways to bring them into line with what the beliefs of councillors are who represent their communities.
Efeso, can you clarify for our audience that the CEOs, which is the council control organization, are they funded by the ratepayers, or are they funded directly by the central government?
No, so their money, rates money goes to the CCO. So they take a portion of our rates as well as the entire income stream of council. So they are
So they are under the council, right? They are part of Auckland Council.
Yes, yeah. And the way they're governed is through their own boards. So whether it's Eke Panuku, Auckland Transport, they all have their own independent boards that oversee their operations.
Sure. Now, moving on to a couple of other things. I know we are running short of time, is around housing. You've been a great advocate of housing, for the low incomes also. But then also, what about the other income groups, like the first home buyers? The council, you talk to the developers, they say it's the council. You talk to the council, you say it's the central government, everything. So it's going round and round. But as Auckland Council, would you be freeing up land?
Yeah, that's very much our intention. So Eke Panuku handles that for us. So their job is, they are the urban regeneration unit of council. And so what our expectation of Eke Panuku is that they will work alongside developers, find areas where we can get good development, where we can get maybe job hubs as well. A lot of shopping centres, looking at those areas. So if you look at areas like Henderson, Manukau, Takapuna, they're called transform areas. And what Eke Panuku will do is work alongside the communities that are there at the time, get business interests there, how can we develop it, make sure that there's good transport links there, and develop in those areas. So Eke Panuku, I think, have been doing a really good job in order to begin the conversation. But one of the challenges that we've got to understand is by the time we get an agreement with a developer and everything in place, it'll take a few years before we see the results. And we're starting to see some of those results now. There's developments going on in Avondale. We know Northcote is getting development going on there. These things take time, but that's what we're committed to doing, is making sure that the land we have available is freed up for that development. The other thing is we have about 400 units in what we call haumaru housing, and that's council-owned housing for elderly, and there are about 400 units that we have here. Council hasn't gone about purchasing any more or increasing its level of housing for people in Auckland, and that's a consideration that I'm being asked to make, that people are saying, well, why don't we move into that area? So that's a consideration. It's not part of our policy settings at the moment, because we believe that working alongside, say, developers, Kainga Ora, that's going to lead to the best levels of development. And I think the bottom line for us is, what does urban regeneration look like? How do we make sure that we can keep prices low? And one of the things that I've been really encouraged by is, if you look at the simplicity approach, that's Shane Brearley and others who are working together saying, well, let's get some land and then let's develop hundreds or thousands of units over the next 10 years, but they will be rental units kept at a good price so that they're not completely unaffordable. So there's those options that we're looking at too. So there's good things in the pipeline at the moment. It's understanding that these things take time, but maybe one of the things we could be aiming for is increasing the number of consents to build. We've seen over, I think, 18,000 consents in the last year. If we could push that even higher, that means that we're continuing to build up a good city.
That's great. Just one thing that you mentioned, and I think most of our viewers would know, those who have been here for a long time, that previously Auckland Council used to have sort of flats for the elderly, etc. And over the years, it's gone to sort of, to private companies for housing the elderly. Would Auckland Council be looking at that again, or?
Yeah, so we call that haumaru.
Yeah, we've got a aging population. We've got to look after our own.
Yeah, so we call that home maru, and that's about 400 units that we have for elderly housing. So whether we increase that is a discussion we really need to have, and that hasn't been the intention of council over recent years, especially since the super city's been around. And keeping in mind that a number of elderly housing units were sold off prior to coming together. So Auckland City Council sold off a number of their housing units, but the ones that remained when we became a super city, they were held together. And Home Maru is the group that looks after that under the auspices of Eke Panuku. Whether it's a discussion that we're willing to have is one that I'm certainly keen on, because we've got to look at what provides people with stability. And I think there are a number of issues that we've got to keep in mind. There's some argument as well, Sunil, that the providers of elderly housing at the moment do a better job than council. So that's just one particular view. And I know, whether it's Ryman's or other groups like that, there are some people that say, well, it's cheaper to get elderly housing there. But I think there can be some really specific focus that council could do if we were to broaden the number of housing units we had for the elderly.
Sure. Second last question, which is in the budget consultation also around climate change. So why should a ratepayer be worried about climate change, and why should they support that budget?
Yeah, well, I think we've all accepted the evidence around climate change, and people want us to take action. And last year, or the year before, actually, Auckland Council voted unanimously for climate action. The climate change, on average, we're looking at, I think it works out to about $1.10, $1.20 per week added as a targeted rate. And this is for consultation. So if people do or don't want it or want a measure of it, then this is why it's important to offer your feedback. But what that's going to do is ensure that we increase our planting, so that we've got more trees in the area. It's encouraging much more frequency around public transport that we talked about, and making sure that more and more people are living within half a kilometre or 800 metres of being able to access a rapid line, which is every 10 or 15 minutes. So there's a number of things that are there where we believe that's meeting some of our climate ambition, which is to reduce our emissions by half in the next 8 years. So if we're true to the climate approach or climate action approach we're taking, this is why we need those things paid for. Again, I can't take a particular view on it. I think it's a good idea, except to say this is for consultation, and the main people, for local government politicians, we're told to keep an open mind. We shouldn't take too much of a view on things until the decisions come back from the public. We consult all the time, and this is one of the issues that we're consulting on.
Sure. And last one, we've heard, from Efeso Collins, who he is, what's his background, etc. But then come 8th of October, why should I vote for him?
A vote for me will be a vote for collaborative leadership that's inclusive and it's future looking. And I'm in this race because I have 2 young daughters. I want them to know that this is their city, they can contribute to it, and that we're going to leave a city for them that will mean that they can stay. I think we've got to arrest the fact that many of our young people will go get trained at university or polytech and then look overseas or outside of Auckland. And I want Auckland to be a unified city where people are accepted for who they are, where the skills that we have are kept here so that we can enhance the city. So that's what you'll be getting for a vote for Efeso Collins. I look forward to meeting people on the campaign trail.
Thank you very much, Efeso Collins, the Labour Party endorsed candidate for Auckland mayoralty. Thank you for your time. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot from Efeso in the coming days. And once again, best wishes, Efeso, for your campaign. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Well, viewers, that was it. That was Efeso Collins, who took some time out on a Sunday evening to join us and give his view around what he thinks the future of Auckland would be, who he is, and why you should vote for him. In the coming days, we will also try and bring you other candidates and also talk about what's happening in the central government and the changes that are affecting us. But most of it, we'd like to hear from you, your feedback, your comments. These live feeds will be again available on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So be sure to follow us up, make some comments, and next time when you bring these guests, we can certainly ask them. I'm Sunil Kaushal, Sunday the 13th of March in Auckland. Thank you very much for joining Weekender on Sunday. Goodbye.